All right. Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining us for Powering Math Progress, harnessing technology to improve metacognitive skills for math learning. We're so happy to have you joining us today, and we're going to give just a moment for folks to join us from the waiting room. But while we do, I want to thank you for taking the time to be a part of this important conversation. And while we wait, feel free to drop your name and organization or where you're calling from in the chat. And I'm going to do that now. Awesome. Seeing some folks coming in. And for those who are just joining us, we're just giving everyone a minute to join. We know there's always transition time. If you want to put your name, your location, your organization in the chat, we'll get started shortly. Seeing folks from across the country, which is always exciting. I am based squarely in the middle. Well, not, I guess Colorado might be squarely in the middle, but I'm in Chicago. So it's good to see fellow Midwesterners in Minnesota, folks in New York, and all over. All right. I am going to get us started, but that shouldn't stop. Feel free to continue to chat throughout. So let's get started. And for those of you I haven't had the chance to meet, my name is Jin Suha. I'm a partner here at the Learning Accelerator, and I have the privilege of moderating today's webinar on behalf of TLA, or the Learning Accelerator. You'll also see my colleagues Ashley, Daniela, and Megan in the chat sharing important accessibility information, and moderating our Q&A. And so throughout the session, feel free to submit your questions either in the chat directly or using the Q&A function. And we'll do our best to address as many as we can during the Q&A portion. And if you haven't already done so, please also introduce yourselves in the chat and let us know your organization or where you're calling in from. I'm also very excited to moderate this chat as a former math teacher, and also as someone who used technology in his classroom. And so excited to hear from these experts today. So we're thrilled to be hosting this conversation because particularly in light of recent declines in national math performance, we know just how crucial it is to support students, not just in what they learn, but in how they learn. And at the Learning Accelerator, we believe one of the keys to advancing math progress is cultivating metacognitive skills, like planning, monitoring, and reflecting, that allow students to persist through challenges and make sense of complex problems. Technology plays a vital role in this work by providing opportunities for real-time feedback, student reflection, and personalized learning pathways. And today's conversation is about how can we use these digital tools not just to deliver math instruction, but to cultivate the kind of strategic, self-aware thinking that leads to deeper, more equitable, and more enduring math learning. And we're very fortunate to be joined today for this important discussion by Jenny Slobodian, Director of Professional Learning at MindPrint Learning, who is graciously standing in for Nancy Weinstein, who had a family emergency to attend to today. So thank you so much, Jenny, for pinch hitting. We're also joined by Dr. Nicole Joseph, the Associate Professor of Mathematics Education, Peabody College of Education and Human Development at Vanderbilt University. We also have Meg Grothman, the Director of Arizona Impact at ASU Prep, and Emily Amick, the Managing Director of Products and Programs at PowerMyLearning, each of whom are contributing to the field around math, metacognition, and technology in crucial ways. To give some background on TLA and why we're excited to engage in this work, TLA envisions a world in which every student receives the effective, engaging, and equitable education they need to reach their full and unique potential. Our work spans across the education sector. We partner with districts, schools, and organizations to build a more connected and responsive K-12 field. And we believe that by learning and working faster together, we can change systems to produce radically better outcomes for kids. And we do this in three ways. The first is by setting and advancing an agenda for change by communicating an actionable direction for students, systems, and the sector. The second is by accelerating progress on key learning priorities by speeding up individual, organizational, and field level learning and action. And finally, the third is by building field-wise capacity to learn and share by supporting aligned partners to learn faster in more open and connected ways. And across all three buckets is our Exponential Learning Initiative, which is a bold effort to tackle one of the most urgent challenges in education, persistent learning gaps. Through this initiative, TLA is leading a network of technology partners, school systems, and researchers to accelerate learning, not just at the edges, but at the very heart of the student experience. And within ELI is the Accelerating Adoption Network, or AAN, where we are supporting the implementation and scaling of 10 networks, each providing a technology-supported innovation in learning environments across America to effectively understand how they work in classrooms as they scale. And three of our colleagues here today, Jenny, Meg, and Emily, are directly part of the AAN. And we're also excited to also be joined by Nicole and her groundbreaking work in math and equity at Vanderbilt University to have an academic perspective. And over the past several months of working together, and particularly with the surge in AI-driven approaches in the classroom, we have begun to wonder, how can we harness technology to teach metacognitive skills in math learning to foster deeper, more equitable, and engaging learning experiences to truly meet the needs of every child? So with that, I am thrilled to introduce our panelists today. So I'm going to start with Jenny Slobodian, Director of Professional Learning at MindPrint Learning. If you could introduce yourself.
Yes. Hi. So I am Jenny Slobodian. I'm coming to you from just outside of Boston, Massachusetts today. Hello, Somerville neighbors in the chat. I see you posting from there. I am pinch hitting for Nancy today, but it might be better said that I'm maybe being traded from the other team because I have historically been a humanities person. I started out in education from the ELA and world language perspectives, teaching in high schools as well as the university level when I was getting my graduate degrees in comparative literature. So it is kind of fun that I wound up here at MindPrint. I did start out more in those humanities-based fields, but what MindPrint has really helped me unlock is this idea of metacognition and how it can really help students across the board in their learning. And so with MindPrint, we really help teachers and students understand what their strengths are and what their needs are, how they learn best, and what strategies are going to have the most impact for whole classroom, small groups, or that individual student. And so through this work over the past 3 years, I have worked with math teachers from the elementary through the high school space all over the US and even internationally, helping to think about how we can make a more robust math classroom for our students when they really understand themselves as learners.
Awesome. Thanks, Jenny. And we're happy to have you. Everyone is a math person, so it's great to have you, even if you're from the quote unquote other side. I'm going to welcome Dr. Nicole Joseph next.
I was laughing over here because that's exactly right, Jinsu. So welcome, everyone. I'm Nicole Joseph. I'm an associate professor at Vanderbilt. I actually am a former math teacher, a former instructional math coach in Seattle. So I'm born and raised in Seattle, Washington, and now love Nashville in the South. So I study Black girls and their experiences in mathematics. Specifically, I've been trying to understand what are the factors, usually macro or meso type of factors that uh, both promote a strong math identity, but also get in the way of developing a strong math identity. And as you can see on this slide, these are just really images of kind of all of the work that I have been putting in, I would say over the last 12 or so years. I have a lab, the Joseph Mathematics Education Lab, and at the bottom, you'll see in the bottom right-hand corner, this was a framework that I have used to support math teachers in helping them to think about what might it look like if we were to engage Black girls specifically in teaching of mathematics. And so I would say all of them are connected to, metacognition. And unfortunately, not a lot of Black girls get that type of instruction where metacognition would be a part of anything that they experience, because many of them experience a lot of worksheets and those types of things. So I'm excited to be a learner as well as contribute to today's conversation. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Dr. Joseph. And I love this framework that you have on the bottom. Next, we have Meg Grothman from ASU Prep Global.
Hi, everyone. My name's Meg. I am a former middle school and high school math teacher. I was in the classroom for nearly 10 years, supporting learners through some of the um, most critical pre-algebra skills, and then moved into coaching teachers in our ASU Prep network with the 5 brick and mortar schools around the Phoenix metro area. I should say I live in Tempe, Arizona. I'm a Sun Devil. And really working closely with teachers is a huge passion of mine, and how we believe that we're going to help learners be successful is helping teachers be successful. And my work extended into the partnership arm 5 years ago, working for our outreach team. Arizona State has a mission to um, uh, believes that we are fundamentally responsible for the communities of which our learners are from. And so we really have a close eye on how we leverage our assets from the university to bring to communities around the state and the world. On the math side of things, I was brought in on a cool project called Digit, and this was built to be a continuum from 8th grade math all the way through Calc 3, because President Crow says, wait a minute, if we're going to fix the challenge that students are not passing Calc 1 in bulk, we've got to look backwards in the continuum and find out where we can support learners. And so we have this platform called Digit, and when we started making the Algebra 1 tool, we started incorporating generative AI against a math validation engine to provide more quicker hints and feedback for learners. And so in this tool, we really believe modality matters. If we're helping learners through math problems, chat feature isn't really something that we see a lot. How can we help learners in the moment with something that's handwriting based with hints and feedback? And so I'm excited to work with the group, listen and learn, like Dr. Joseph said, and yeah, share some of our insights from implementation today.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Meg. And I'm going to pass it off to Emily to introduce herself.
Wonderful. Thanks so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here. I'm Emily Amick. I am, as Jinsu said, the Managing Director of Product and Programs at PowerMyLearning, and I'm calling in from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, where it's a little gray today. And just like my fellow panelists, my background is also in the classroom. I spent more than a decade as a high school math teacher and a coach before moving into professional learning and content development, but always with a real focus on instruction that helps students develop understanding of math concepts and also develop their math communication skills. And then over the last several years, I pivoted into product development, and where I've been able to work on some incredible tools that really elevate student thinking and support instructional decision making for teachers. So I'm doing that at PowerMyLearning. We're a national nonprofit, and we're known for our family playlists, which is collaborative math learning activities that invite students to engage in fun learning at home with a family partner, and then to explain their reasoning out loud. And we're currently piloting a classroom solution as well through our Accelerating Adoption Network participation with PLA that engages students in the classroom in discourse-rich activities and then captures their talk and surfaces insights for teachers. So I'm really excited to just be a part of this conversation today and learn from and with everyone else. Thanks.
Awesome. We have an amazing group of panelists, and I already see some love in the chat from folks about some of our panelists. And Emily, I just wanted to say, I just love the way that you think about math talk amongst not just students, but also with family, because I feel like it can be such a barrier for some families who are like, I'm not a math person, but like, you know, providing the playlist and the setup so that they can talk to their students about what they're learning. I love that. So before going, we're going to quickly review what is metacognition. And so when you think about what metacognition is, it's the ability to think about your own thinking. It's thinking about thinking. So it's about planning, deciding how to approach a problem, monitoring, so checking progress and understanding while solving, and evaluating, reflecting on the solution and strategy used. Metacognition is not just knowing the answer, it's knowing how you got there and why it works. And in some cases, also knowing why it doesn't work. So we know it's effective because students who receive explicit instruction in how to plan, monitor, and evaluate their learning can see up to 7 months of additional progress over the course of a year. So like, why is that? The reason why is the students who have developed these metacognitive skills, they're the students that know when to seek help. They know what types of help they need. It's not just I'm stuck, it's saying I'm stuck in this specific way. And they're able to leverage their strengths and their needs are supported as well. So I'm going to pass it over to Dr. Joseph to explain what does it look like to teach metacognitive skills in a math classroom?
Yes, thank you, Jinsu. It's important for teachers to understand that, students are not going to come to you necessarily knowing how to do this. So it's very, very, very important to model what does it sound like? What does it feel like? What does it look like to engage in metacognitive skills? I think we do this very, very well with like literacy, like in terms of like reading a book, doing read alouds, think alouds. I'm arguing that it is the exact same process. So modeling the thinking aloud during problem solving. So, that could be the teacher doing it multiple times, giving the students multiple times to do that. So it could be something like, I'm thinking about how I want to decide where to start in this problem. So, I think I want to do this, that, or the other, and saying why. I want to do that because, so using that language over and over and showing students how to do that is very important. I think another thing way that it looks like is to encourage students to reflect on their process. So, what did you enjoy about that process? Tell me something that helped you through this process called metacognition. And I would actually use that language to help students build a vocabulary around what it is. Embed metacognitive prompts. So when I was teaching, there were two things. One was like strategy reporting. First, I did this. Second, I did this. Third, I did that. That's okay, but to get at a deeper level, asking, how did you decide? So how did you decide to add 20 plus 35 or whatever? Gives the instructor and the student way more depth as opposed to just telling themselves or the teacher, what did you do first, second, or third? So reporting on the strategy. Fostering risk-taking without penalty for mistakes. So this is like one of my favorite. It's like students need opportunities to practice without being penalized. So, we're good about like, having quizzes and assessments. And I think assessments that have grades should be not a part of this process. It should be a lot of formative assessments because we want students to take those risks and to feel comfortable in utilizing metacognitive skills. And me personally, I would have like big chart paper around the room with, language, old school, vocabulary of words where you're asking them to write in their journal and to utilize some of those words to demonstrate their understanding of metacognitive skills. And so the use of math discourse to surface student thinking is very important. When I was in the classroom, I also did a lot of interviews. I didn't know that's what it was called because this was way before my PhD. This was way before my master's degree. I just felt like I probably need to talk to the kids and see what they know and how they're getting there. So that's another really important one. So I don't know if any of my colleagues want to add or share additional insights, but those are just a few things for how it could look like teaching it in a math class, teaching metacognitive skills in the math class.
I love the call out to specific strategies, Dr. Joseph. It's so helpful to make really tangible connections. We're seeing um, similar strategies in our own prep classrooms. And the other side of it is how do we implement this in a very personalized way while I might have 20 to 30 learners in the room? And so we are balancing on this side, this idea of blended learning. So what is the high quality resource or activity that's happening on the side so that you can have those really in-depth interviews and conversations with learners? And so that's just something I would add is how do we make sure that learners are engaged in all parts of the room so that these really high quality conversations can happen. And I think we've got a lot of good tech tools and things like that to keep the conversation going.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Dr. Joseph, and also Meg on those. I also love that you're, Dr. Joseph, that you're bringing up that math should be a social class. It should be something that we're talking about. It's not just following steps and following directions. It's, really thinking, asking others, did you get the same answer? How did you think about this? Love the way that you're thinking about it. And I'm picturing back my classrooms, those chart papers as well. So love that visual that you have. Thank you for both of you for sharing there. So now that we have a common understanding of what we're talking about when we say metacognition and math learning, Jenny, we'd love to hear from you a little bit about how you see metacognitive skill building connecting to broader student agency and self-directed learning. And why is this important not just for individual achievement, but also for closing opportunity gaps?
Right. Well, I think what I tend to focus on, and I think everything that Dr. Joseph just shared with us on those different steps about bringing metacognition into the math classroom, really it's about demystifying learning for the students. Math is not, some difficult, confusing thing I'm never going to understand. Memory isn't magic, things like that, right? We can really help them learn not just what they need to know, but how they learn best. And that's a big part of what the metacognitive process is. And so, as even you were saying, it's not just I'm not a math person. It's not even just I'm bad at word problems. Once students start to really engage in these metacognitive processes and build their own strategy toolbox, they're able to say things like, I can problem solve better when I see things in spatial relationships. So I know when I see that word problem, I immediately have to draw out all of the fractions that are in there so that my brain and how it works best can tackle this problem to the best of my ability. And I think that also goes a long way to what we were saying about making students understand that everybody is a math person, right? I've totally been sold since working in the cognitive skills space that not only does that help the individual student develop confidence in their own learning, they can then advocate for themselves. Our learning process is always affected by external factors, but when you know yourself, you're better able to ask for what you need, whether it is that space to draw out the word problem, or vice versa. You might be the student, probably more like me, who, when they see a graph, needs to talk it through with someone because my brain works in words. I need to talk it out. I need to hear what you think, what I think. That'll make it easier for me to understand. So metacognition provides those kinds of that kind of self-awareness and that way to build your own strategy toolbox that then becomes a common language. You are essentially creating learner communities, because once one student knows how they work best, they're sharing that with their friends in the classroom. And then the teachers can start to band together and use that same kind of information and share it with families as well. So when students start to learn this about themselves, hey, getting started is a little bit difficult for me. Could you give me the step one in the process? That'll make it easier for me to go. Those are things that we can help students understand about themselves that give confidence and more broadly create a learner community based on how we learn best and what we can do to support each other in our learning.
Yeah, and I just underscore that point about once students know how they're learning and then they're able to say, I'm able to advocate for myself. or able to say, this is what I'm stuck on, this is what I need help with. So I think that's so powerful. Um, Often in education, theory is great, but it's often hard to connect that theory to practice. That's pretty hard to do at times. So let's talk a little bit about how are we seeing schools support this work in meaningful ways. So I'm going to come to you, Meg. At ASU Prep, how are you seeing schools help students develop these metacognitive habits in math classrooms? And what does this really look like day to day? And what role is Archie playing in that?
Sure. And this was touched on a little bit ago from Dr. Joseph with this idea of low risk. We want students to be able to fail without it being this massive problem for them, because there's a lot of anxiety wrapped up in that. And so there's a lot of encouragement in our classrooms where teachers are helping students take that first step. Take that first step, go for it. Let's just see what happens. And specifically how we've worked in this pedagogy with Archie is it's a line by line experience. So learners can submit that first step and Archie can say, wait, I think you made a tiny mistake, and it actually knows what that mistake is. And learners can fix it and keep going on the process. And so we really think about math being like the Google Maps of mathematics, Digit specifically the tool of, can we redirect learners in the process so that the whole problem isn't wrong at the end? And I think that takes away some of the anxiety and that fear of failure, as well as that we get line by line. And when we look at teachers don't have time to see all of those steps. And they don't have time to talk to every single person who says, I need help with the first step. And so that's how we've embedded technology to be that aid to teachers.
I love that because I know it can be especially extremely frustrating when a student does everything and their answer doesn't make sense. But if there's just a little bit of feedback throughout that can prevent and have prompt the student to be like, check your first, the first step that you did, or let's talk about that first step and have them pause and think about that. It's just so powerful. Um, Emily, we talked about, some families not feeling like they're math people. They may not have had the best experience with the math in schools. So how can families and communities be part of supporting metacognitive development, particularly through technology? And how are you seeing that applications in classrooms with your tool?
Yeah, so we really started at PowerMyLearning with home-based learning tools, right? With family playlists that engaged families meaningfully in their children's learning, and specifically in math learning. And what we've learned is that they are, uniquely positioned. They're the best people to support metacognition because they're not the teachers. They're not instructing the child on how to do the math, right? They can just literally be there to ask questions, to prompt them to explain, and to provide that sense of safety that kids need to take those academic risks, right? So that simple act of just, prompting a kid to say what they're doing and why, it really helps them recognize their own thinking so that then they can have all the benefits that Jenny was talking about in terms of, knowing how to advocate for themselves. And I think just, a sense of knowing that their thinking is valued too is just so critical for feeling an identity as a math person and a sense of agency and safety in doing math. So Jinsu does have a clip of a first grade student who is doing some explaining. She's reflecting on how she built a picture graph to compare some sets of different colored toys. So you'll see her describe her strategy and analyze her results. This is Liliana. She's a first grader at an elementary school in Queens, New York.
First, we counted all the objects we had of red, yellow, and blue. And then we drawed whatever number equal to. So red, there was 6. Then yellow, there was 5. And blue, there was 4. So
excellent.
Red has the most.
The most, excellent.
Yellow is like medium. And blue has the least.
Excellent. So all together, how many objects do you have left? Oh no, do you have all together?
15.
15 altogether?
Yeah.
Great.
So there's Liliana, and I think, this video now goes back to her teacher, right? Who sees her reasoning through this work, not just coming up with an answer, not just a calculation, not interpreting somebody else's digital graphical display, but her own, and presenting her thinking through her explanation. So that has been a really, really powerful thing that we've, seen happen in homes, and that insight for teachers has been really great. But we're now bringing this same kind of emphasis on student voice into the classroom with a solution that we're piloting now. And similar to the home learning activity, it invites students to engage collaboratively with a peer, right? So there's a little video, shows them how to play a game. They then play with the peer or complete an activity with the peer, and then are prompted to record themselves explaining their thinking about something, right? And so what we've seen is, this is just a hugely powerful window for teachers to understand student thinking. And looking ahead, we're building in some functionality that'll do some analysis of the videos too, to provide some insights for the teachers that then they can use to take action on. So saving them a little bit of time. I mean, they can still watch the videos, of course, but culling some insights for them. The goal is really just to make that student thinking visible and accessible for teachers. But I think one thing, like, I just want to double hit on, because it's been said so many times here, is this idea of learning in community. And that's so core to our beliefs about how kids learn, right? That this happens, and adults learn, that this happens together through discourse and in community. And so any tools that we develop, any technology that we want to introduce into a classroom, has to be in the service of that community building and supporting that collaboration and dialogue from where we sit. And so that's something that I'm just especially excited about, that we can, yes, elevate student voice and, expose thinking and help them develop metacognitive habits, and at the same time supporting the community of learners for, so that they can still rely on and learn from each other.
Yeah, and I think that learning from each other is so crucial. And I'm going to just elevate for those just listening to this webinar, something Dr. Joseph put in the chat that said, she also said that she would add that when we support students, especially students who do not always have access to quality math instruction, metacognitive skills disrupt deficits perspectives. And I think this chatting that can happen, people are realizing, oh, like this students I thought was quote unquote smart, but like they're also struggling. And like I'm hearing like how they are like thinking about the problem. And I'm like, oh, like that's great. Or like for a student who like maybe like, oh, they're not a math person. Like that's not a thing. Like everyone's a math person. It's like I see that everyone is thinking about this. It's not just someone just randomly knows how to follow these steps. There's thinking that's going into it. Dr. Joseph, anything you'd want to add about your comment?
Yeah, just that for people to remember that. So I'm going to speak about Black girls, but I am sure that some of this is true for other racialized minority students. But Black girls they're just seldom positioned as knowledge producers. So it's like, there's sort of an assumption with even thinking about metacognitive skills, that there's like a underlying, okay, this student has enough sense to be able to, to engage. But I'm asking people to think a step before that, to even begin to look at students, particularly marginalized students who have never probably really participated in class, who might be failing your class, who you think, doesn't know how to do whatever math class that you're in, and to try some of the strategies and these things that we have talked about today. And, I think you will see some changes. I think also, helping students to take more risks. I know for students of color, African American kids, they need to have that trust from their math teacher, to be able to take more risks, to be able to try things, because a lot of them don't see themselves as math folks or math people. And so just encouraging people to think about that, that there is, I think, a lot of power in the strategies. And that could be one way of you contributing to a more liberatory agenda, by just simply going hard on using metacognitive skills and teaching students of color, those skills and ideas.
Yeah, I love that. Using metacognition to dispel these deficit perspectives is so key. Metacognition is not new. This is something that's happened in math classrooms throughout, but now there's, new digital tools that are coming out and you all are working with them. So let's dig a little bit more into the question of technology supporting students in developing metacognitive skills in math. What changes are you seeing with math instruction and metacognition, and what kinds of technologies have you seen effectively support this skill building in math? This could be digital feedback systems, adaptive tools, reflection prompts. So Meg, I'm going to come to you first. What have you seen that's been particularly effective with tech?
Sure. So in Digit, powered by Archie, students have the ability to ask for hints, or they get feedback and can choose to read the feedback or not based on the line by line problem solving. And what we've seen is actually the ability for our teachers to see when and how many hints students are choosing to use throughout the process is helping them with the way that they're teaching and supporting learners. So, for example, if students are making a bunch of mistakes and not asking for hints, they're having those conversations with learners like, hey, maybe try the hint out here. I love that you're going for it, but let's see if one little hint can help you down the path. And then on the other end, it's maybe students are relying too heavily on the hints. Let's go without it, see what happens, branch out, take the risk, go for it. Because again, you're not getting the whole problem wrong if that one step is wrong. And so it's really helping our teachers understand our learners better, having just the back end data to see what learners need and how often. And the other thing is, we've seen lots of AI tools, lots of chat bots and things out there. And I know that everyone's touched on community and what that means. And I think that's where the richness of the learning and the support comes from. And with the tech side of things, the chatbot, if you will, should just be a supplement to what teachers are using and teaching. And that should be aiding what's going on in the classroom, not being the underpinning of everything. And so really using technology in a way that props learners up with the same pedagogy that you're using is the most meaningful thing in the classroom overall. And so that's what we're seeing is looking for really targeted ways that learners can use the tech tools to, again, maybe even in the modality, maybe they're writing the steps down, as they go, and then getting the feedback. They're not having to say, I need help with the distributive property. It's just like, hey, I think I could use a hint here. And it's going back to those metacognitive skills to know what they need.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing. Jenny, what are you seeing at MindPrint Learning for tech in helping develop metacognitive skills?
Yeah, I was thinking back to what you were mentioning about theory to praxis, right? And I think one of the things that we are constantly hearing from teachers is we want to provide more risk-taking opportunities. We want to have these interviews with students, but where is the time? And so I think a lot of what we're doing at MindPrint is helping teachers make really good strategic choices about the strategies they're using with and for their students, either from an instructional perspective or through those metacognitive approaches where students are actually accessing their own learner profiles and finding out, when I'm learning something new, is it best for me to do it with words, with pictures, or with hands-on 3D relationships? And so students can be learning that on their own. They receive personalized strategies based on, again, are you having to remember something today? Are you reading a challenging text? Here are the personalized strategies that are clickable. Many of them are interactive so that students can kind of click through checklists. So that can save teachers time in the getting to know the student and be able to have that personalized feedback. And then on the other hand, we also help them note in their classrooms which students should be grouped together for small group instruction, again, based on how they learn, how they recall, who is going to collaborate together. We're measuring things like flexible thinking, which is really what we're talking about when we say this risk-taking and this creative problem solving. And so we can help teachers identify who's going to have more trouble with that and who's going to be really good at it. And so let's make sure we hear from some of these strong, flexible thinkers. They can be adding to the modeling of problem solving in the classroom. So I think we're really trying to help teachers and students save time by matching them to the best fit strategies right off the bat. And then I would say the thing that we also tend to see is that we are giving teachers tons of data, but they don't have the time to look through it all. And so one of the problems we're trying to solve with MindPrint there again is, here's your best next step. This is the best fit strategy for the small group or for your classroom. And if that one doesn't work to your liking, here's the next one based on what we know about how your students' brains work.
Awesome. Thanks for all the work at MindPrint and sharing about that. Emily, share with us what's happening at PowerMyLearning and how tech is supporting with metacognitive learning.
Yeah. So I think the thing that we're really grappling with at PowerMyLearning is this need to support teachers and the math community in general from shifting from an answer getting mentality to a sense making mentality, right? And that's where metacognition lives, is in the sense making. And this is, it's challenging for technology because it's much easier to assess right and wrong than it is to assess reasoning. But tech is evolving very quickly, and there's emerging technology that we are harnessing in really exciting ways to try and actually analyze student thinking from their talk. And so this is, I think the most exciting thing really that we've been able to do. And I want to emphasize that the goal is never to do any thinking for the teachers, right? We just want to create more space for them to think and act by, elevating some things from student talk. But what we're looking at is, we have over 11,000 videos of young learners like Liliana talking about math, and so from that, we're really able to start doing a lot of deep data analysis of, what does explanation look like, sound like, what does it mean to demonstrate, knowledge of facts and procedures versus extending your thinking and connecting to other ideas, and how can we tag those things. And researchers have been doing this by hand for a very long time, right? There are frameworks that exist, and they hand code transcripts and do their analyses. And so now there's technology that makes it possible to do that kind of tagging and coding and analyzing really pretty quickly, and to be able to provide those kind of insights to teachers. So this is what we're just getting really, really excited about. And as we're able to track that over time, hopefully we'll also be able to see how students' thinking is evolving. If we have videos of Liliana, over multiple months, we should hopefully eventually be able to identify trends in her thinking and areas of growth. And I really think, speaking to what Dr. Joseph was saying too about metacognition and focusing on student talk and thinking as a disruptor and as a tool for equity, we work with pre-K to 5 students. So we're talking about young learners. They're just learning how to communicate their thinking, how to talk about, how to acquire mathematical vocabulary. Very many of them are multilingual learners, so they may be learning math in a language other than the language that's primarily spoken at home, right? So that's like synapses firing all over the place, right? So much cool brain things going on there. Yeah, and students with learning differences, right? By making their thinking more visible and actionable for their teachers, right? By providing that kind of visibility, I think we can make a real difference for them in terms of, elevating their brilliance for the teachers who may not have the time in their day to see it, without the use of a tool like this. So that's just something we're really excited about right now.
Yeah, that resonates a lot because I would have loved to have sat down with every single one of my students and like learned. And I remember like every quarter I would sit down with my student like and do that. But to have something like videos, have people able to analyze the videos and share trends, like I think that could be super powerful to see how our students' metacognitive skills actually being developed. Dr. Joseph, curious to hear from you about what are some examples of tech that you've seen that have helped students develop their metacognitive skills?
Actually, I really haven't. And I think that has just been because I haven't been in a lot of spaces. Like I've been learning about chat boxes and things like that, but not with a direct line to thinking about, metacognition. But I could imagine just listening to my colleagues talk about the way these chat boxes and these ways emergent technologies can take student work and provide feedback could be pretty powerful. In fact, I had a student in one of my, she's a new PhD student. She was assessing using AI feedback. Like the students were doing chemistry and using like a textbook, and they had to do like these little write-up summaries, and they had to do like old school quizzes or whatever. And so she was writing about, thinking about how might the AI feedback help them produce like better summaries and produce like better scores. So I've seen it in that way, but like not directly with like K-12 students. So, but I imagine that there could be some powerful things that could happen.
Yeah, I think, and this also feels pretty new. And so I'm excited to hear from these folks who have some examples, and also excited to see what comes in the future. I'm going to shift us over to audience Q&A right now. And so a reminder to submit questions in the chat or the QA box. So this is one that question that came in. I'm excited about this question because I think that there is a fear around this technology, and especially around generative AI, especially on on the literacy side, that this is just giving answers to students, right? Like it's not actually helping them think; it's just going to spit them out. So, what are some examples? I mean, and there's so many ed tech tools on the market, and we know there's about to be even more generative AI tools that come on out. So, how can educators tell which ones are going to be the ones that truly support metacognitive development? And which ones are just going to offer surface level engagement? Like, how are you able to distinguish between those? And what advice would you have for practitioners around this? And I'd open it up to anyone to jump in.
My advice would be to ask the ed tech companies what sort of pedagogy they've trained their model on. It's very straightforward to actually, in product development, tell your AI engine or put the guardrails up that we're not an answer generator. And so you have to keep reminding your tool, do not give me the answer, do not give me the answer. The way we've designed ours is actually with layered hints and feedback, meaning we're not actually telling you the whole right answer to the next step. We're giving you a piece of it. Have you thought about the distributive property? Right? Not distribute and then you get this. It's have you thought about this? And then students can ask for, tell me more. And then, okay, what's one more layer there to get the student thinking? And so that's what I would recommend for different AI tools or math tools in general. And also get in there yourself and try it out. Pretend you're the student, get into the tool and find out if it's just giving you answers. And then also ask yourself, do that metacognitive process on ourselves of like, is this helping me think? Am I learning or am I just getting told the answer? And so I think that that's important to understand how the tool was made and with what background and why.
And that should be a very simple question that they should be able to answer. What pedagogy did you train this on and to go off of? Did anybody else want to jump in on that question on, what kind of features should teachers and districts and schools look at when trying to adopt one of these tools?
I don't have a direct answer to that, but I want to put back into the space again that these emerging technologies are amazing, but we also need to think about like, where do they show up? So there's a lot of schools that do not have access to these types of emerging technologies. We also know that from research that a lot of times the teachers that are in schools that serve like low resourced students and families, that oftentimes they're brand new. Even though the research says we need our most experienced teachers with our most vulnerable kids, but that's not how we do it. There's a lot of teacher tracking going on as well. So it sounds like just like a really easy question, but first of all, it's like, do they even have the technology at their schools? And secondly, if they did have it, it's like, to what extent are there, opportunities for teachers to be able to have those types of, conversations? Because usually it's like layered, either at the district level or, at the school level. And where is the teacher voice in that process? I know that I've done a lot of work on like thinking about how is math curriculum even adopted, and few schools involve teacher voice on that, let alone, Emily, like families and communities and students in that process. So I just want to remind everybody that not everyone has access to, to this type of technology.
No, this is such an important point, and I think I'm going to put in the chat a resource from us around digital divides. And as we think about, not only is it about like the boxes and wires, like do they actually have devices and the infrastructure and internet? Are we supporting teachers and making sure that they actually know how to use the technology effectively so that they can use it in instruction really well? Do students know how to use it really well, and thinking about that? So thank you for bringing that up, Dr. Joseph. We have a question from the audience, from Athena. Any thoughts on how to support teachers finding a good balance, especially with such limited time, when it comes to sense making versus answer getting, considering the students' end of year accountability metrics are unfortunately still more focused on the latter? So I think, Athena's bringing up there's still high stakes testing. At the end of the day, that does matter, for teacher accountability, for school ratings, fundings, and all those kinds of things. So how do you balance developing the metacognitive skills and helping students get to the right answer correctly? And you can also say, is this a false choice, to go through there? So I'll open up to everyone.
I'd love to jump in. I think absolutely want to acknowledge that there does have to be a balance, right? We need students to have fact fluency. They need to be able to recall simple addition and multiplication facts. Why? Because it frees up that cognitive space for them to do the higher order thinking, right? So absolutely, they need that. They need procedural fluency. They have to be able to, work flexibly with numbers. So I don't think it's an either or. I do think it's a both and. But that doesn't mean that it needs to take, twice as much time, because these things are mutually reinforcing, right? And so when we emphasize thinking and sense making, it then in turn does make it more easy for students to build that flexible procedural thinking and develop the fact fluency. And I think a practice that I would really encourage teacher teams to take on, site leaders, school leaders, coaches to take on, is to really start thinking about student talk and student thinking as data, right? We sit in our data meetings and we look at the benchmark assessments and the spreadsheets, and we make instructional decisions based on this, right? Who's going into what intervention and how are we going to act on this data? And I'm not saying that data isn't valuable, but so is, the talk and the thinking. So finding ways to capture that, in a PLC meeting, in a data meeting, in a collaborative lesson planning or a coaching session. Can we have somebody, who scribed some student talk? Can we look at or listen to recordings of student talk, unpack thinking, and think about that as a basis for making some instructional next steps as well? And I think these things are going to lead to students being able to perform better on those assessments, of course, and I think we'll see the data correlatively grow together if we start thinking about it in that way.
And I would just piggyback on top of that, saying that at MindPrint, we do a lot of study to kind of understand the correlation between students' cognitive skills and their performance on standardized assessments. And we know how much of an impact a student's flexible thinking has on their ability to perform well on a math assessment. And so by giving them those opportunities to take risks without penalty, we are actually preparing them to be able to take those assessments. Now, of course, we also have specific test taking strategies that we can provide to students that help them leverage their stronger skills and support the things that they're not quite as strong in. So when you understand yourself and how you learn, right, a student who knows they get overwhelmed by options should definitely be crossing things out they know are wrong immediately, so it's not getting in their way, right? Things like that that we're actually now starting to see be built into online testing systems a bit more consistently. So at MindPrint, we're really excited to see, you know, even digital tests allow you to cross out answers now often, and that supports students that have that flexible thinking need or have a working memory need, trying to keep too much information in there. So just to add to what you were saying, I think technology is catching up, but as Dr. Joseph said, not every student has that technology or the practice with it or the familiarity with even the device that they're taking things on. All of that is going to impact the access they have to these tools. But I definitely would say if we are helping students become self-aware and think through their thinking, it's absolutely going to help them get the answer as well.
And I would add to this. So, I mean, I did some of this when I was in the classroom. Day one, like day one of class and throughout the entire semester, it's so important to have, well, this is what I did, a metacognitive conversation with the kids. So I would say things like, you know, you have to take this assessment that the state of Washington has written, you know, that really doesn't give a lot of information besides what you can remember, you know, and I would use words, of course, that the kids would understand. But essentially, I would tell them about that. And I would also tell them about like, okay, and here is this math journal where we're going to use like math talk. We're going to think more deeply that you may not have a lot of time to do on this assessment. So basically helping them to understand, Athena, this balance through a metacognitive conversation, and to tell them straight up that, you know, we won't always be able to engage in like the depth of, you know, using our math journals and manipulatives and all those types of things. But it is a really important piece to help you, you know, really understand, you know, math. And so I always brought my kids into the problem solving process because I'm not working harder than them. So bringing them into that, into this problem solving is really, really important. But I will tell you this, if you do not build a community of trust and respect, it won't work. I'm just telling you that now. But if you can build a classroom, especially in math, where kids trust each other, they trust you, you can also, you know, create triads. Like it can just be like a routine where their kids quickly make a triad. They're listening to each other, you know, have the talk or whatever. Or it might be a quick exit ticket that they're doing in the triad that they're then giving each other feedback, right? But you have to model that over and over and over again. But once they get it, boom, you don't have to do all of that work. So maybe you do it once a week. You know what I'm saying? So I think that there are ways to balance it, but it's a heavy lift at the beginning because you have to really model for kids how to do it.
Thank you so much. We did have one more question, but from Lori, but I'm going to send it actually to the panelists and have, and if you all are open to it, to respond to it so we can get the answer over to Lori for the sake of time. Just wanted to say, like, I think some things that I've heard, I love math instruction and I love metacognition, like genuinely geek out on this stuff. So it's been really interesting to see what's the potential for technology. And I think the thing that like I'm hearing loud and clear is that technology can help make the thinking come alive to teachers, because by video, other ways it could help prompt students. So it's not giving away the answer, but helping students develop their metacognitive skills by providing hints. And then also that data is such an important piece there as well. And hopefully those are ways that it can help actually provide teachers next steps to work from there. And again, I just want to emphasize that AI and technology and the tools that you all are developing can help actually make the human component even more important by saying, this is the students I need to pull for small groups. Oh, I heard you talk to your student. I heard you think your video about this think aloud. That was so excellent. I love the way that you were thinking about it. Those are things that I think that I'm really excited about with the potential for technology to work here. I want to thank these panelists. I am just so inspired by everything that they've done. We shared links in the about the panelists and their organizations in the chat. And also, we'll be hosting more in this series over the course of the spring and summer. So make sure you're subscribed to TLA's newsletter to stay in the know about these future topics and dates. Give us a follow on LinkedIn, on socials, and other places. And thank you again to the panelists. I know I've taken a lot away from this, and you should be seeing your recording of this in your inboxes very soon. Thank you all for joining, and thank you to the panelists again. Have a great rest of your day.